Coming up on our newscast tonight, the 2022 Beijing Winter Games begin. Some 3,000 athletes will compete in over 100 events for the next 16 days. South Korea extends COVID-19 distancing rules. With Omicron infections soaring, another daily high in the overall daily virus tally is reported. The first televised debate for the upcoming presidential election featuring 4 candidates was finally held. They are legally obliged to participate in at least 3 more sessions. Hello, hope you're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let us begin with the top story at this hour. About an hour ago, the opening ceremony of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics was held. The theme Spring, as Friday marked the first day of that season in traditional East Asian calendar. It was held at Beijing National Stadium, also known as Bird's Nest, a stadium that opened the Summer Games in Beijing back in 2008. This time, however, tickets weren't sold to the general public and countries cut down on the number of athletes that walked through the stadium. The South Korean squad came out at 73rd with a cut-down number of 11. Also participating in the event, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and former table tennis star Yoo Seung-min, the torchbearers that started the relay earlier in the day. South Korea is extending distancing rules as Omicron infections soar. The nation reported a record daily increase in overall cases. Authorities also consider a return to normal life and treating the virus like a seasonal flu if the number of severe cases and deaths remain low. Choi Min-jung has the latest.
South Korea witnessed yet another record-high COVID-19 tally on Friday, with 27,443 new cases. The number of infections surged by more than 4,500 over a single-day period. Compared to 2 weeks ago, cases have increased 4-fold. Authorities forecast a further uptick in cases as more people are expected to get tested with the long holiday now over. However, the number of critically ill patients dropped slightly, remaining in the 200s for the 7th straight day. Given the current virus situation, the government has decided to extend the current social distancing measures for another 2 weeks. This means that social gatherings will remain limited to 6 people and businesses must still close at 9 p.m. During a morning briefing, Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum said the decision comes in a bid to tackle the spread of the Omicron variant. Although there were some opinions pointed toward easing restrictions, Kim said the most crucial thing to do now is to act safe.
It is difficult to predict the aftermath of the Korean Lunar New Year holiday, and the number of confirmed cases is growing day by day. The first priority is to slow the spread of Omicron, which is now heading towards its peak.
The government has also vowed to push for a return to normal and consider ways to treat COVID-19 like the seasonal flu once the number of severely ill patients and the fatality rate remain stable.
We have discussed that we should gradually ease restrictions and bring back our ordinary lives if we have critically ill patients' death rates and the medical system under control, even with increasing number of infections.
This comes as authorities say that the Omicron variant spreads twice as fast as the Delta variant, but the chance of developing severe illness is roughly 1/3 or 1/4 that of Delta. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, there are calls within Japan for the government to acknowledge its use of wartime forced labor at a number of mines that it's trying to get named as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. South Korea convened a task force of experts and officials who are working to formulate an effective response to the controversial bid. Yoon Jung-min brings the updates.
Voices are growing within Japan for recognition of its use of forced labor during World War II at its Sado mines. This comes as Japan has recently pushed for UNESCO World Heritage for the mines, where at least 1,000 Koreans were subjected to forced labor under Japan's colonial rule. Japanese politician Shi Kazuo has reportedly urged the Japanese government to face its history of forcible mobilization of Koreans, citing historical documents related to Sado mines published in 1995. Descriptions of the forced labor can be also found in historical records published by Niigata Prefecture, where the controversial mines are located. Japan is pushing to get Sado mines listed on the 2023 World Heritage List, only reflecting the Edo period from 1603 to 1867 and excluding the wartime period leading up to and during the 1940s. But there have been calls for the broader context and history of the sites to be included. The South Korean government on Friday held its first task force meeting and discussed response measures against Japan's UNESCO push. Led by Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Public Diplomacy Lee Sang-hwa, historians and officials from 10 related ministries or organizations gathered to discuss how to respond. They talked about how to organize a suitable response while preparing the necessary historical documents. They also plan to garner cooperation with the international community. In 2015, Japan's Meiji-era industrial sites, including Hashima Island, where Koreans were forcibly taken to work in coal mines, were designated as World Heritage Sites following Japan's promise to acknowledge its use of forced labor. But the Industrial Heritage Information Center in Tokyo displays documents aimed at showing that Koreans were not discriminated against, and it fails to honor the Korean victims. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
America's top diplomat condemned North Korea's latest missile test and reaffirmed Washington's approach to solving related issues through diplomacy and dialogue. Meanwhile, the U.S., Australia, and Japan are carrying out an aerial combat training exercise to deter any potential adversary. Kim Da-mi reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed strong concerns over North Korea's renewed flurry of missile tests and has reiterated Washington's dialogue and diplomacy-based approach to solving North Korea issues. According to the State Department on Thursday, Blinken said this during a phone call with South Korean Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong the previous day. While pointing out that Pyongyang's latest round of missile launches violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions, Blinken underlined cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan for complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Blinken further reaffirmed that the Seoul-Washington alliance is a key pillar of peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, and discussed ways to deepen cooperation on regional and global issues. Also on Thursday, U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the U.S. remains closely engaged with its allies in efforts to completely denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. He added that diplomacy is one of the most important tools to achieve such a goal. Meanwhile, air forces from the U.S., Australia, and Japan on Thursday kicked off the Cove North 2022 aerial combat training exercise for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. According to Voice of America, a spokesperson from the Pacific Air Forces said the trilateral exercise is to strengthen a unified coalition that prevents any potential adversary, including North Korea, from engaging in military action. The rare comment mentioning the regime is seen as a warning to Pyongyang and its latest firing of an intermediate-range ballistic missile that has the ability to hit the U.S. territory of Guam. The UN Security Council is set to hold a closed session on Friday to discuss the North's recent missile tests. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Amid recent tensions at the Ukrainian border, Russia and China issued a joint statement on Friday calling for NATO to halt its expansion. The statement, which included harsh criticism of the U.S., was issued during Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to China for the Winter Olympics. In addition, Moscow said it fully supports Beijing's stance on Taiwan and opposes Taiwanese independence in any form. The Kremlin said Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping held warm and substantive talks in Beijing and described their relationship as an advanced partnership with a special character. With Russian troops stationed near the Ukrainian border and high tensions between Moscow and Kiev, European leaders are making moves to steer the situation away from conflict. Meanwhile, the South Korean government is trying to analyze how the situation could affect the country's security and economy. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
European leaders are making efforts to ease the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The latest visitor to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, on Thursday was President Tayyip Erdogan of nearby Turkey.
As I have emphasized before, Turkey is ready to do what it can to end the crisis between two friendly countries, which are also neighbors in the Black Sea. I emphasized once again during our talks today that we can happily host a summit at the leaders' level or technical level.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron prepared a fourth phone call in a week with Putin, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he was planning a trip to Moscow. Russia confirmed it was possible that Scholz and Macron could travel to Moscow together as a symbol of European unity. The two are joint signatories to the Minsk agreements, the stalled 2015 deal designed to bring peace and autonomy to the Russian-supporting eastern Ukraine. This comes as South Korea's state think tank, the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, said this conflict in Europe could spill over to the Korean peninsula as a new Cold War. With the U.S. turning to the regional allies such as Seoul and Tokyo, Moscow could turn to the Chinese government for a strategic alliance, which could see the two sides face off in East Asia. In terms of the economic impact to the country, the South Korean government assessed that there will not be much of a direct hit.
Despite the recent heightened tensions, the economic impact for now seems limited. First, energy and raw material prices saw bigger changes, but that isn't solely directly related to the Ukrainian border crisis. And considering the amount of energy supplies and reserves, the short-term direct effect on our country doesn't seem big.
In addition, South Korea's trade with the two countries is minimal. Despite this, the government said that the country should be aware of the impact the conflict could have on the global stage, such as supply chain issues as well as the possible impact on global economic growth due to the unrest. Kim Do-yeol, Arirang News.
South Korea's four main presidential candidates are slated to hold their second live televised debate next Tuesday evening, 5 days after the first. The upcoming event is to be hosted by the Journalists Association of Korea. The exact time, format, and TV channels that broadcast the debate will be finalized by the association in the coming days. According to Nielsen Korea, the first televised debate for the upcoming election recorded 39%, the highest rating in related events since 1997. Staying with the first televised debate for the upcoming election, four main candidates clashed over the housing market, national security, and other state affairs, but they did see eye to eye on one thing: the need to reform the national pension system. Lee Kyung-won brings the highlights from that session.
On stage for the first televised presidential debate on Thursday's night were Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party, Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party, Shim Sang-jung of the Justice Party, and An Cheol-soo of the People's Party. The first topic was the country's housing market, but all four candidates laid out different solutions to cool down the overheated house prices.
대대적 공급 확대를 위한 정책이 제1순위가 될 것입니다.
먼저 대출 규제를 완화해서 집을 사는데 좀 대출을 받을 수 있게 하고
집값을 하향 안정화시키겠다는 정치권 합의가 제일 우선돼야 할 것 같습니다.
많은 공급을 통해서 집이 없는 사람들이 자기 집을 가질 수 있도록 하겠습니다.
But things heated up over a controversial land development scandal in Daejang-dong. The development project was co-run by Seongnam City but resulted in massive profits for a small private company instead. Yoon Suk-yeol slammed Lee Jae-myung for his responsibility as he was the Seongnam City mayor at the time.
배당받을 수 있는 최상한선이 캡을 씌우지 않고 이렇게 설계를 했다는 것 자체가 이게 문제 있는 거 아닙니까?
저 이익을 뺏었습니다. 공공환수를 5,800억까지 했고요.
In response to repeated attacks, Lee hit back with accusations of his own for the former prosecutor general.
후보님은 이거 한번 생각해 보셨습니까? 저축은행 대출 비리는 왜 봐줬을까?
제 질문에 대해서 자꾸 이렇게 다른 걸 얘기를 하신 거 보니까 여기에 대해서 답을 못 하시네요.
But the Daejang-dong talk didn't stop there, with the two other candidates having their say too.
이재명 후보가 투기 세력과 결탁한 공범이냐 아니면 활용당한 무능이냐 둘 중에 하나예요. 이 딜레마를 이재명 후보께서 분명하게 해명을 하셔야 되는 겁니다.
막대한 특혜 이익이 사실은 성남 시민들 돈 아니겠습니까? 그러면 전부 환수해서 성남 시민에게 돌려줘야 된다고 생각하는데
이미 국정감사, 검찰 수사, 언론 보도 6개월 이상 이렇게 검증된 걸 다시 얘기하는 것은 국민에 대한 예의가 아닌 것 같습니다.
The session became Lee versus the three others, all making joint attacks. Candidates were also divided over diplomacy and national security. Two candidates from the liberal bloc, Lee Jae-myung and Shim Sang-jung, addressed Yoon's recent pledge to ramp up the country's deterrence against North Korea.
사드 배치 이거 고고도 미사일 방어 체계인데 수도권에 하면 고고도 미사일은 해당이 없습니다. 왜 그걸 다시 설치해서 중국의 반발을 불러와서 경제를 망치려고 하는지.
근데 선제 타격 운운 자체가 그거는 전쟁하겠다는 선전포고가 같은 거예요.
그거는
그 군사 지휘관이 하는 건 모르겠는데 대통령 후보가 그런 말씀하시면 그거는 불안을 조성하는 그런 그 안보 그 퍼플리즘밖에 안 됩니다.
선제 타격이라고 하는 킬 체인을 가동할 때쯤 되면은 그 사실상 전쟁 상태라고 봐야 됩니다. 극초음속 핵미사일이 날아오는 것이 거의 확실하다. 그리고 이미 전쟁 상태에 돌입한 거나 다름이 없다라고 할 때 하는 것이 멀쩡히 있는데 그냥 선제 타격? 그거는 예방 공격이라고 그래가지고 완전히 개념이 다른 겁니다.
While Yoon defended his stance, the conservative bloc's other candidate, An Cheol-soo, went on the offensive towards Lee Jae-myung. An targeted Lee's support for three no's in the current administration's China policy. No to additional THAAD, no to a joint military alliance with the U.S. and Japan, and no to the U.S.-led missile defense system.
그런데 그 산불 자체가 너무나 문제가 많은 것 아닙니까? 우리가 자주 국방, 자주권을 잃어버린 그런 정도의 아주 심각한 수준의 그런 이야기들입니다.
특히 중국과 관련해서는 우리의 무역 의존도와 이 협력 관계를 결코 무시할 수 없기 때문에.
Despite fiercely debating over different topics, the four candidates were eye to eye on one single topic, a reform of the national pension system. An said the national pension is running out of funds and is increasing the tax burden for the next generation.
국민연금 개혁은 누가 대통령이 돼도 하겠다 이렇게 우리 네 명이서 공동 선언하는 건 어떠십니까?
All candidates agreed on such a pledge, but remains to be seen what detailed plans will be put forward. The four candidates are legally obliged to participate in at least 3 more debates, which will begin after candidates' registration on February 12th and 13th. 이경은, Arirang News.
South Korean consumer prices stayed well above the central bank's target in January. This comes as central banks around the world move to tamp down inflation, rising 3.6% from a year earlier on surging fuel and food prices. The trend boosted the case for more interest rate hikes in 2022. Here's Ji-young with a breakdown of the digits.
Consumer prices in South Korea have risen more than 3% on year for 4 months in a row. Statistics Korea said on Friday its consumer price index was at 104.69 in January, up 3.6% on year. It's been around 10 years since the CPI has risen more than 3% for 4 months in a row. The CPI has gone above 3% in October for the first time since 2012, which is far higher than the government's target of 2%.
The rise in January's consumer prices has been driven by the increase in industrial goods, including petroleum goods and processed goods. Prices of agricultural, livestock and fishery products have also continued to go up, with the cost of dining also rising.
The rise was largely led by an increase in the prices of industrial goods. The price of gasoline climbed by nearly 13% on year, and diesel jumped by more than 16%. Major items on people's grocery shopping lists have also got more expensive, including eggs, which rose nearly 16% on year.
I did some grocery shopping during the Lunar New Year holiday, and compared to last year, items on the shopping list, including eggs and vegetables, have been creeping up. The cost of dining out has also gone up by around 1,000 or 2,000 won. As a housewife, I can really feel the prices rising, and it is tough with earnings staying the same.
The cost of dining out also increased by 5.5%.
Prices of ingredients have risen a lot, so I'm thinking of raising prices.
Consumers are also having to pay more for their lattes and Americanos after Starbucks Korea hiked its beverage prices by up to around 30 US cents last month. Other cafe joints have also raised their prices. An expert says consumers are likely to see high prices in the near future.
Inflationary pressure is to continue as there are difficulties in decreasing liquidity, and the global supply bottleneck is likely to remain.
엄지영, Arirang News.
Many facilities that were once key cogs in South Korea's industrialization are abandoned, and they could have been seen as a blight on the landscape. But instead, these places are being turned into cultural sites that still retain their industrial heritage. Kim Bo-kyung sheds light on how these sites are given new purpose.
A mine filled with deposits of jade, dolomite, and talc. Formerly called Dongyang Mine, the cave was discovered in 1900 and began being developed in 1919 during the Japanese colonial period. The mine was key in the local area's development during Korea's industrialization, before finally closing in 2018 due to low profitability. The cave has been turned into a cultural spot where visitors can experience how the mine worked, while enjoying the parts of the cave that have been revived into a unique cultural spot.
It is not that easy for the public to see where miners worked in the past. Transforming a closed mine into a theme park, using a variety of content while showing how it was mined could let the next generation see the past.
I'm here in Jeolla-do County in the heart of Jeolla-do Province. Along the edge of the beautiful Hanbaeksan Mountain, cushioned by the snow right now, stands another old mine that has been reborn as an art and culture complex. Another busy industrial site, the Samcheok coal mine, helped lead South Korea's rapid industrial growth since its opening in 1964. After it was shut down in 2001 due to low demand for household coal and the government's policy of closing unprofitable mines, it stayed abandoned for years before it was reborn as the Samtan Art Mine in 2013. The compressors that provided air for the miners inside the tunnel to breathe still stand, decorated with a variety of colors and acting as a background for artwork to shine.
Some of the young generation do not know much about coal mines, let alone briquettes. They're surprised to see how historic sites can be revived and used as a cultural complex. We hope such spots that were sources of the energy industry can be developed more while preserving them.
Similar transformations can also be seen in Seoul. After Korea suffered from its first oil crisis with a major shortage of crude oil in 1973, the government built an oil depot near the Maebongsan Mountain in 1978 to prepare for future emergencies. For 41 years, it has long been classified as a first-class security facility. But as the Seoul World Cup Stadium was built in 2001 for the World Cup, the depot was considered too hazardous, leading it to be closed in 2000. Its 5 tanks have now become open culture spaces.
I believe urban regeneration is alchemy. We cannot redevelop everything, but we do need to have important sites be reborn, to let the next generation know the era we went through and for us to look back on that period of time.
Talc caves, coal mines, and oil storage tanks. Once major centers of industrialization, these places might have stayed abandoned, forgotten from history. But now they're alive again, producing culture and bearing witness to our changing world. Efforts like these to preserve and revive the sites will ensure that history is remembered. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Cold wave conditions are forecast to continue. Weather conditions across most regions will be close to what we normally see in midwinter. The capital region will see temperatures staying in the minus territory for the entire weekend. Tomorrow mornings in Seoul will be extremely cold at minus 11 degrees. This is about 5 degrees lower than the seasonal average. Snow falls in the forecast for southern parts of the country starting tonight. For Jeolla-do Province, up to 7 centimeters are expected until tomorrow daytime. Chungcheongdo Province and Jeju Island will see relatively less, with about 1 to 3 centimeters. The surrounding regions, including Gyeongsang-do Province, will see some light snowflakes flying around. Morning lows range from minus 15 to 2 degrees nationwide. Chuncheon will be ice cold at minus 15 degrees. Daytime highs will be 1 to 3 degrees lower than today. Seoul will get up to minus 3 degrees. Suncheon -2. Daegu and Gyeongju will reach 2 degrees. Cold wave conditions are forecast to ease off by the middle of next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And this just in, South Korea's Foreign Minister Jung Eun will be meeting with his American and Japanese counterparts in Hawaii on February 12th. They will discuss mainly North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. This is where we have to wrap things up. Thank you so much for watching.